Okay, we just finished updating the CentOS operating system, and we can see that that actually completed successfully, indicated here by the exclamation point for complete. Now, what I'm going to do is I am going to go ahead and clear my screen here, and I need to install QEMU. Now, for those of you that aren't familiar with QEMU, QEMU is kind of like a little hypervisor that we can use to containerize virtual machines. It's something that we'll actually employ in the configuration of OpenStack when the time comes. Now, to install it, what I'm going to do is I'm going to type yum-y, because I don't want to have to answer yes to every question, install, and I'm going to say CentOS-release QEMU-EV and hit enter, and what this is going to do is it's actually going to install that package. Now, there is another feature that's already integrated by default into this CentOS installation. That's going to be something called MariaDB. Now, MariaDB is a project that was created by the same people that originally created SQL Server. Now, the SQL database. Now, what ends up happening in this situation is I want to get rid of what came with this version of CentOS, because the software that I'm going to be using and OpenStack is actually going to install its own version of the MariaDB. Now, what I'm going to do to remove that is I'm going to type yum-y remove, and I'm going to say MariaDB-libs to remove all of those files and configurations. Now, the other part to this is that when it comes to the CentOS, it uses a firewall which we are going to ultimately want to disable. But in order to be able to disable it, I need to remove it from the SE Linux configuration. Now, that means I need to edit a text file. Now, I'm not a big Linux user when it comes to like VI or Vim. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to install a tool that I like to use called Nano, which in my opinion makes editing files so much easier, and I don't have to remember what keystrokes to use to save and to exit and things along those lines. So in order to accomplish that, I type yum-y install Nano, and I'm going to install that application as an editor, and now all I need to do is just type nano, and I'm going to type the name of the file that I want to edit. Now, the file I want to edit is going to be under the etc SE Linux, which is the security folder config, and I'm going to hit enter. And what we're going to see here is that we have this idea of SE Linux as enforced. Now, you can see it says enforcing means SE Linux security policy is enforced. Now, I cannot remove or disable this feature until I stop this. Now, in order to stop it, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here and change enforcing to disabled. I'll hit Control X, yes to save, and save the configuration file. Now, once that's been done, now I have the capability of disabling the firewall. Now, to disable features, in fact, there's going to be two features that I'm going to specifically disable. I'm going to disable the network manager, and I'm going to disable the firewall daemon. Now, in order to do that, the keyword is going to be system control. I'm going to say disable, and I want to disable the network manager. Hit enter. And I'm going to want to disable the firewall. So I'll just up arrow so that I can edit this, and I'm going to say firewall D, which is the daemon, and now both of those configurations are off. Now, what I'm going to do, just to expedite this, to make sure these syntaxes are actually functional as far as disabling these features, I'm going to reboot this machine. So rather than just restarting the service, I will merely reboot the virtual machine itself. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up VirtualBox, and I want to see it come back up. Now, I know it's small and it won't take long for it to become operational, and I want to make certain that I know what the IP address is with the config. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to log into the session here. So I'm going to say root CentOS, root OpenStack. there we go, and I'm going to say IP address, and we can see here that the IP address is 10.1.0.56. So edit out of that, and what I'm going to do now is go back into my session, and up arrow, let's make sure it's still 56, and log in, OPENSTACK, and now I'm back into the system. Now, I need to install OPENSTACK itself. Now, there are many, many different flavors or versions of OPENSTACK, and I want to know what they are because I want to install the most recent. Now, I think the most recent is Okata, but we'll find out how we verify, and we'll go through that installation. It won't take long. So the main goal here is to use Yum to say search for OPENSTACK. And what it's going to do is it's going to give me a listing of the OPENSTACK installations. And as you can see here, we have Kilo, Liberty, Mitaka, Newton, and Okata. That's the one that I want to use. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say yum-y install. And I will say CentOS. Actually, I'll just go ahead and copy this. CentOS. Copy. Paste. And hit enter. And it's going to go through the installation process. Again, the -y prevents me from having to say yes to all of these and slow the process down. So we can see we have a lot of stuff installed, but primarily here the main focus is we have actually installed OPENSTACK Okata. Now, once that's done, once I have Okata, what I need to do is I need to determine how I'm going to manage this installation. Now, I don't know if we can say that's what makes this video special, but there is a streamlined process that I can use to configure OPENSTACK using Puppet. Don't have to know anything about Puppet. In fact, they've already written the utilities in something that is referred to as Packstack. Now, the Packstack initiative, it's part of the RDO project.org site if you want to go down to and download it and look at it and read about it. But what it is it uses Puppet to actually orchestrate the installation of OPENSTACK. Now, we're going to install that software, and what's going to end up happening is we're going to create a special, what's referred to as an answer file, and that answer file is going to be where we specify what we want actually set up and configured, but rather than manually installing it, what we're going to do is we are going to use Packstack. Now, to do that, I need to first of all install the software. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say yum-y install OPENSTACK-Packstack and hit enter. And it's going to pull it, and it pulled it for Okata, the version that I installed of OPENSTACK. And you can see it's pulling Puppet, Python, all of the languages to include Ruby and things that we're going to want to explore and know as much about as humanly possible when it comes to working with the idea of orchestration. Now, this process isn't going to take a huge amount of time, so I'm not going to bother pausing. But what I want to do is I want to talk about the next step, because the next step is going to be using this application, the software that we're installing, to create the answer file. Now, the answer file actually, in my opinion, streamlines the process because it gives me an outline of exactly what all of the features are, and I'm going to talk about what we need for the most minimal installation. But later on in your studies, say you want to look at something like containers, we could actually enable the Magnum service, which is going to be part of OPENSTACK, and it's going to be the answer file where we would actually do this. So let's take a look at this notion of the answer file and how to create it. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to type Packstack, because that's the program, tac answer dash file, and I'm going to tell it where I want to put that answer file. I want to put that answer file in the folder of home tvinson, and I want to call it answer.txt. And it's going to create that answer file. Now, what if I want to look at it? Well, again, we'll turn our attention to Nano. I'll say Nano, home, tvinson, answer.txt, and here we see all of the information that was actually populated into the answer file. Now you'll notice we have things like the MariaDB. Well, in here what we'll do is through the use of ins and ys, we're going to be enabling and disabling features. But this is a basic installation. I just want you guys to know how to do this. So I'm not going to change a lot of things. In fact, I'm pretty much going to leave it the way it is. I will turn on a feature called Heat, which is going to be the orchestration utility that we'll use for OpenStack. And I'm also going to change some passwords just to make things easier, because you're going to see the system is going to create some relatively complex passwords for some of the projects that are part of OpenStack. Now, looking at that, what we first of all want to do is I'm going to give the system a default password. So the configuration underscore default underscore password, again, is going to be OpenStack. And those features that I was talking about, those projects, as an example, we see here, we have Glance, which is the image service. We have Cinder, which is the storage service. And you can see by applying a Y here, we're saying that we actually want this to be installed by Puppet. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to scroll down, and I'm going to get to the one feature that I said I was going to activate, which is going to be Heat. And I'll change that from a no to a yes. And that's all we have to do to enable a package. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to scroll all the way down to where we get to authentication. Now you can see here there's integration with things like VMware as a back end. We can communicate to vCenter. So a lot of people operate in the assumption that it's an all or nothing effort. So if I choose to use the idea of OpenStack, then I'm stuck with OpenStack. And that's not true, because there's a lot of cross-compatibility, backwards compatibility with different platforms. So we will entertain different aspects, but what I'm trying to do right now is I'm going to be going down to the closer to the end of the answer file, because I want to get to the keystone configurations. I'm looking for the admin user and the demo user. And what we'll find is that the system is going to create some pretty complex passwords for these functions. And down here we're hitting keystone, and what we see here is I should have an admin password. Notice right here I have an admin password, and I have admin and demo. And notice it came up with these passwords. Now I want to use open, oops. Didn't mean to do that. So I'm going to have to exit out and not save this. So I'm going to say exit and no. And then I'll go back in and make those changes again. In fact, we also want to make a change where we're going to have a network time server here. So I am going to type config password. We said it would be OpenStack. I'm going to turn on Heat. Bypass the settings for communication to VMware. Just bear with me, I'm trying to go slow because I want to see the configurations as I run. So there's MariaDB, root user, keystone, and there's my admin and my demo user. So we will merely change these to OpenStack also. Change the demo user to OpenStack as well. And then let's see, I'm looking for NTP. Gateway Directory Authentication Protocol settings, more Keystone settings. And for those that you don't know, Keystone is the identity manager. It's the component that determines you are who you say you are and dictates what privileges and capabilities you have inside of the OPENSTACK installation. And glance. I realized I could just search for it, but at the same time, I just want you guys to get an idea of the order of magnitude associated with this answer file that got created. And you can see a lot of functions and a lot of capabilities in it. Ironic, Nova. We'll talk about what each of these different projects are. Well, let's see, that's the neutron setting, so I should have hit the NTP configs here somewhere. All right, let's do this. Control W. And I'm going to look for NTP. Let's see if it's actually in there. NTP servers. I went right over top of it. Now I need an NTP server, so I'm going to go online here. Actually, I'm going to see if I can browse and find one. So I want to have a open NTP server and see if Tick and Talk or some of those others are there. So let's go ahead and just grab one of these. North America, where I'm at, and I'll just grab this one right here. So right click and copy and go back into my config and Control V and just copy that guy in there, and let's hope that works. All right, so with that, I'm going to Control X. Yes, save the configuration. There's the text file. The answer file has been configured. Now what I want to do is I want to use this answer file to create my OPENSTACK install. So to orchestrate this process, all I'm going to do is I'm going to say Packstack, and I'm going to tell it that I want to use the answer file located in home tvinson called answer.txt, and I'm going to hit enter. Now this process is going to take about 20 minutes. So what we're going to do is I am going to pause the video here, and then we'll come back and I'm going to make certain that I can actually get to the dashboard of the OPENSTACK installation, and once that's accomplished, we're pretty much done with building the lab. At that point, then it's an issue of taking a look at what we can do in the configurations. So how can we manipulate it? How can we do and apply the configs? So I'll see everyone in that video.